Edward was a barred rock chick that I got a little over a year ago. He was curious and crazy, but he sure learned a lot and grew up to be a great rooster. He protected his flock like none other. So this channel is a nod to Edward. Edward, wherever you are, I hope that my curiosity could help me learn as much as you learned to be a great rooster.
I hope that doesn't drive you guys crazy someday. Like my background? We're going to be talking about Ready Player One, if you guys can't tell. I'm going to continue on from where I talked about last time, and I'm going to share my screen with you because I made a little outline. This kind of helps me stay focused. So, are you guys ready for the tunnel from hell? We're going to share screen. We're going to share the whole screen. And tunnel, here we come. There we are. Okay, so as you can see, I'm in my StreamYard pose right here. We'll go over to YouTube, but we'll also pull up the notes. So the parts about the book that I wanted to, where I left off last time, I kind of just told you a tidbit about the different characters that are in the book and the movie, and just kind of describe the intro. But I'm going to go a little more into detail about the first part leading all the way up to the Jade Key and the first gate. So I annotated last time that in the book, Parzival, the main character, is Wade Watts. One thing I wanted to point out is the big understanding that you really get when you read the book. Wade Watts talks about where he came from, all his life, his history, where he's living, how poor he is, how he ended up in Oasis. I'm going to switch the screen kind of back over so I can see myself. So I don't know why, but seeing myself kind of helps me concentrate a little more on, well, it doesn't really help. Let's just go back to the notes. Let me start off with this. Wade Watts in the book talks about how he came to be an orphan. And it's kind of sad. I'm not going to lie. When you read the book, I had a lot of tearjerker moments. He talks about how his father had kind of either left or died at a very young age. But it was his father who was into the big 80s stuff. And he kind of grasped onto what he could of that stuff because, I mean, you know, like his friend H. H also lost his father when he was very young. And H says a lot more about it in the second book, that his father was a big Prince fan, like Purple Rain, Party Like It's 1999. So when you get into the second book, H knows all about Prince and it comes to play. But Parzival, Wade Watts, also talks about his mother and how his mother helped he had a good mom. His mom raised him. His mom took care of him. She played with him in the Oasis. They played games a lot, which helped him up his skill level in order to help him get the Jade Key and into the first gate. So his relationship with his mother is very sensitive. And that sensitivity comes hitting him like a Mack truck later on in the second book. But in the first book, he talks about how the world in the future, in his time, our future, is just riddled by drugs. I mean, you know, opioid overdose. And there's also some touch and information about climate change and all that stuff. So, you know, it's true fiction. But politics aside, Wade Watts talks in the book about how his mother had overdosed and died accidentally. And that's how he ends up living with his Aunt Alice in the stacks. Not that his mother lived in a great place. She lived in the slums too. But he got stuck in the stacks with his Aunt Alice, her boyfriend, and like there was like 2 other families living in the trailer with them. So because the place was so crowded, that's why he always slept in the laundry room on the floor. There was like a family of 3 living in the living room, and then a family of 5 living in the second bedroom, and then his Aunt Alice and her boyfriend in the first bedroom. So it was very suffocating, which is why Wade Watts made a thing about leaving the stacks when he would go to school. he would run off to this. I talked about the pylons of cars that surrounded the city. He would run off to his private area where he found uh, a way to hook up power and heat to the back of a minivan at the bottom of one of the stacked car wall. Inside of there, he was able to get his goggles and his haptic gloves, and that's where he enters Oasis. So he spends majority of his time and his days in this minivan at the bottom of a stack of cars. It's like a junkyard. Parzival also talks about, why he pursues the egg, what he dreams of doing, how it's the Oasis is a way for him to get away and get out. So moving on in the book, he talks about the day Halliday dies. Now, he doesn't come out the gates in the beginning of the book talking about Halliday. He just talks about Halliday in a sense of how he created Oasis. But then in the next chapter, he starts talking about Halliday's death and how he is presenting his heir as whoever wins the Easter egg. Okay. That's when egg hunters, gunters becomes a big thing. Now, let's go back to the movie, because if you guys see right here where I wrote movie, it says jumps right into the first race. I don't know why I wrote first race. There's no other race, and there's not even a race in the book. In the movie, they're all competing in a race car race, and they're trying to go through King Kong to get to the Jade Key. And you're just kind of like, what's going on? And it's cool and it's action packed, but that's not even how it's described in the book. In the movie, he's in the DeLorean, which they go in depth in the book as to why he chose the DeLorean, why he put the Ghostbusters logo on the side of the DeLorean, and also other modifications inside that you don't even know about in the movie. So it's not bad. It's not great. It's just different. And then in the movie, he turns to the side and he tells H, he goes, "Do you know who that is?" And I think everybody that's watching the movie is like, nobody knows who that is because you haven't established that character. And it turns out to be Artemis, right? Now, in the book, it's very different. Okay, before he even pursues the Jade Key, before he even finds it, and I talked in my last video as to how he found the Jade Key on his education planet of Ludus, right? And he just stumbled across it by listening to his teacher in Latin class. Okay, that has nothing to do with a race car. In the movie, he is racing in the race, and Artemis is part of the race. In the book, he is kind of doing his egg hunting thing, and he does one of these things where he visits blogs regularly that have to do with the egg hunting. And Artemis happens to be a popular blogger. In fact, he has this crush on her. Let me show you. Let me see if I can find it. Hold on. No. Okay. So here, this is the description of her. But first, let me go back one here. Okay, so this chapter here, he's talking about how he found her blog and that he has this massive cyber crush on Artemis, right? And in the book, they even spell it the way that an online name tag would look, right? So there's Artemis' name. And he says she occasionally posted screenshots of her raven-haired avatar. If you remember the movie, the girl almost looks sandy blonde. And he goes on to say, I sometimes always save them in a folder to a hard drive. So this kid is obsessed with her before he even sees her in real life. He says her avatar had a pretty face, but it wasn't unnaturally perfect. In the Oasis, you got used to seeing freakishly beautiful faces on everyone. Isn't that a fact for anybody online? This is why I don't use filters or any of that crap. It's just, you know what? This is the way I look. You guys are stuck with me that way. And we're all stuck with each other the way we are. So that's my soapbox. Artemis' features didn't look as though they'd been selected from a beauty drop-down menu on some avatar creation template. Her face had a distinctive look of a real person. as if her true features had been scanned in and mapped onto her avatar. Big hazel eyes, rounded cheekbones, pointy chin, and a perpetual smirk. I found her unbearably attractive. He goes on to talk about her body type is somewhat unusual, which isn't this more of the case of people online? In Oasis, you usually saw one of two body types in female avatars, right? Absurdly thin was wildly popular because of the supermodel look. Thanks a lot, modeling industry. Or the top heavy, wasp waisted porn starlet physique. Now, I will forewarn you, if you're going to read the book, it's not exactly PG-13. He does talk about a few sexual innuendos that you read it for yourself. In parentheses, which looked even less natural than an Oasis and blah, blah, blah. But Artemis's frame was short and Rubenesque, all curves. Now, I have a video clip I'm going to show you, but I want to kind of touch on a couple other things. Remember that. Put a little pin in that. He does describe her as short and Rubenesque, all curves, right? That's a lot. That's like 90% of women in this world, folks. Just telling you. Any of you guys that have that fantasy that, oh, this girl online's got to be beautiful. Yeah. Just know we're all a little pudgy and round in some places. All right. So he says he knew he had a crush on her, was both silly and ill-advised. Now here's the virtual reality of things, the reality of virtual. What did I really know about her? She'd never revealed her true identity, of course, and her age or location in the real world, there was no telling what she really looked like. She could be 15 or 50. A lot of Gunters even questioned whether she was even really female, but I wasn't one of them. Probably because I couldn't bear the idea that the girl of whom I was virtually smitten might actually be some middle-aged dude named Chuck with back hair and male pattern baldness. I like that part. I went and continued to highlight that because I remember in the movie, H made that comment. And I thought it was funny. In fact, I think H made that comment before the race. So let's close this one since we don't need it anymore. All right. And then dare I continue? He does describe her a little later on as he finds the Jade Key. As I mentioned before, he found it on his school planet of Ludus. And interestingly enough, when he gets into that tunnel, the Dungeons and Dragons thing. I'm not real savvy on it. She actually enters in right after him, and he's a little shocked. And he meets her virtually for the first time. In doing so, he immediately recognizes her, right? He says she wore a suit of scaled gunmetal blue armor that looked more sci-fi than fantasy. Twin blaster pistols. Now, you got to remember, in this world of Oasis, it's a virtual game, basically. You can customize your avatar to look like whatever you want. So just like in the movie, you see just a vast array of anything and everything. And that's kind of how the book is, too. She had twin blaster pistols that were slung low on her hips and quick draw holsters. Sounds like Tomb Raider to me. And there was a long curved elvish sword, scabbards across her back, fingerless road warrior style gloves. I mean, Ray-Bans. The girl was like cyberpunk rock crazy looking. And so overall, she seemed to be going for a sort of mid-80s post-apocalyptic cyberpunk. Didn't I just say that? Girl next door kind of look. I don't know what kind of girls you guys got next door, but if one showed up wearing fingerless gloves like Mad Max, I'd be like, she ain't no girl next door. And it was working for me in a big way. In a word, hot. Okay, so guys like that crazy, I guess. That's what he liked. So he goes into that whole description of her, right? Now, this is for a later part. I'm also going to touch on one more thing before I play this clip, which compares what we just have a mental image of Artemis, right, to the movie. And then I know you guys saw the movie and you saw her, but you noticed in all of that description in the book, it does not say anything about markings on her face, right? Okay, just remember that. So let me go to my notes so I can pick right back up. Let me check first over at the YouTube studio and look at the comments. Of course, my little maggot Safe is here. How's it going, sis? Love you. I'm just jabbering on. So I'll come back if you're going to type more stuff, but I'm on a roll. I literally had 2 biscuits with a lot of honey on it. So I'm all amped up on sugar. Okay, so we covered Parzival as Wade Watts. When Halliday dies, it's not that different from the movie, I have to admit. I just put that bullet in there because I was brainstorming. How he knows Artemis and how he meets her. Okay, so he meets her in the first tunnel where he was getting the jade key. Okay, in the book he does that as well, except he had already got the key. He played this video game and won the key, and he was on his way out, and she was on her way in. She's like, "Who are you?" He's like, "Oh, I'm just, I'm trying to get the." He didn't want to tell her he got the key, right? And so the interaction was very tense for him. And by the end of it, she figured out that he got the key because there's a scoreboard on everybody's HUD, heads up display, right? And she gets mad at him, but not, but at the same time, she's like, we should work together. And of course, this guy's not going to say no. You just read the description. He's crazy about her. He's not going to say no. So that's how he meets her. And then, of course, he tells his friend H, and H is like, dude, I'm telling you, it's probably a guy named Chuck. So that's a cute part to read because just the way he also describes how his heart rate goes up. He loves the way she's so cool. She's so smart. She's not stuck up. She wants to work with him, even though she doesn't know him. And he just thinks that's impressive. I mean, anybody would be, right? So in the movie, it jumps right into the first race, which, of course, Parzival figures out that instead of going forward through the race, through watching some of the replay clips of Halliday, you go backwards. Okay, that's a pretty clever way of doing it. But then once he wins the race and gets past Kong, it's like he gets the key and goes right into the next one. In the book, you don't just get the key. He has to get the key, and I think I even wrote it right here. He has to get the jade key, right? Which is what he gets when he goes into that Dungeons and Dragon tunnel. He has to play this video game, Joust. He has to play Joust, and he has to win it. His obstacle in the book was that he wasn't that good at Joust. He played it a lot when he would play with H in the basement. Remember the basement? H's private hangout? So he was kind of counting on what he learned from H to win it, and he did. And then he had to leave that tunnel, and that's when he meets Artemis. And then he had to go, because of a second riddle popped up once he obtained the key. He figured out he had to go to Middletown. Middletown is a part of Oasis that is a recreation of where James Halliday grew up. They don't talk about that in the movie. There's hundreds of thousands of planets in Oasis that you could visit, and a lot of them are like museums. They're places where you can visit the history of James Halliday and GSS, the company that James Halliday and Ogden Morrow created together. Ogden Morrow has a very significant role in the book as well, which you don't hear much about. Like, you literally see him twice, maybe 3 times in the movie. So he goes to Middletown, a place in Ohio, supposedly, and he goes to James Halliday's virtual house. And he goes up to the room and gets on the computer and logs in with the key, which is what the riddle kind of told him to do. And then he has on the computer what's called the Dungeons of Daggerath. I think that's another Dungeons and Dragons thing. Not savvy on it. I'm so sorry, guys. I don't know Dungeons and Dragons. I wasn't that kind of nerd. So if it's not a Dungeons and Dragons thing, I'm so sorry too. Just write it in the comment below. Anyways, Dungeons of Daggerath is a game that pops up on this computer in James Halliday's virtual room. Parzival has to play it. And when he plays it, he actually has to beat the game. The book sits and talks about him, how he wins the game. And then a gate opens up when he wins the game. See, every key opens a gate. They don't say anything about that in the movie. In the movie, you just get a key and you got a key. You go forward. What are you going to do with a key? So in the book, he opens the gate by winning Dungeons of Daggorath on the computer. He jumps through the gate, and all of a sudden he's in an arcade playing a video game, and it seems vaguely familiar. And he's kind of like, so you got to remember, in the time that James Halliday died in the book to when he finally finds the first key, it's been years. So during that time, everybody in the world has been watching all the 80s movies, listening to all the music, playing all the games that this guy, they're trying to know James Halliday every in and out so that they can figure out where this egg is. And so while Parzival's sitting here in this virtual arcade trying to figure out what is going on, he sees his reflection in the screen of this old-fashioned arcade, and he sees that he is not Parzival. He is Matthew Broderick from the movie War Games. And then all of a sudden a familiar voice comes over. It's like, hey, Dave, what's up? And he's basically a character in the movie War Games. And as part of winning the first step in the first key and the gate, he has to run through the dialogue. Now, let me skip over to this tab where it actually talks about whenever I correctly performed 7 actions or recited 7 lines of a dialogue in a row, the game would award me a cue card power-up. So as Parzival is working through the challenge of the key and the gate, you got to remember he's in a video game. He's a video game character. He's getting points and he's getting tools and things that you would pick up as you would as a first player game or would, So he's getting a power up. And then next time I blanked on what to do or say, I could select the cue card icon and correct the action or the line. So the challenge of this gate is that he had to recite the whole movie as if he's a character in it. And it even says down here that he was trying to play it in a different window so that he could know what to say. And when he tried, the computer gave him a warning, no cheating. Try to cheat again and it's game over. So the last part of the first challenge is to recite the entire movie of War Games. And then it talks through here about how he goes through, and he as David Lightman, a teenage computer geek from suburban Seattle, had single-handedly prevented the end of human civilization. Now, if you watch the movie War Games, you get what that's saying. He basically had to play the character of Matthew Broderick in the movie. And it's like anybody that loves a movie would do. Sit and recite the lines. I could watch The Breakfast Club on mute and just tell you what everybody said. I could watch The Princess Bride on mute and tell you what everybody's saying. I mean, they're just some movies. So the difference is nobody knows what movie they're going to end up reciting in this challenge until they get there. So luckily for him, he knew War Games. He does pass it. Right? And it even says right here, there was another riddle as soon as he beat that, got to the end of the movie, right? And then it goes into another riddle as to where the next key is. And I think it's the copper key. So I'm not going to jump to that because I want to kind of stay on track here. And, there's Faith again. I'm not a D&D nerd. No, I'm not. I'm sorry. I knew what it was, but everybody was doing it. And I was just like, I'm just not into what everybody get. So did I get hit with the zombie frequencies from yesterday? Oh my God, that's so funny you said that. Because I had this appointment downtown yesterday. I'm just going to go off in the left field here for a minute. Everybody that doesn't know my sister Faith and I, just bear with me. But we were at an appointment yesterday. Bobby was with me, and we have this old cell phone that doesn't even have service. This thing only runs on Wi-Fi, and I pay a $10 fee to get monthly talk and text on it, and that's it. In fact, that's what I text you and Vader on, right? And I told Bobby my appointment was at 2:00, and I told him, I said, I'm going to shut this off and we're gonna leave it like in the car while we're at the appointment because I don't want to hear that buzzing shit. I don't know what it's gonna do, but after the little everybody's been getting, and now we get this. See, here's another weird part that Bobby kind of asked me. He goes, how many times has the warning service gone off on these things, or Amber Alerts have gone off on these things, or weather warnings gone off on these things? And nobody says, well, nobody sends out a week in advance some news ad or advertisement or announcement that says, listen, we're going to be doing a test. It's only a test. There's nothing to do or nothing to worry about. This is only a test, and it's going to happen next week. Nobody's ever done that before. And you're going to tell me all of a sudden for the last week and a half, it's been all over the news that, hey, just so you guys know, on Wednesday at 2:20, why 2:20? Why not 2 p.m.? Why not 1 p.m.? Why not noon? 2:20 p.m., there's going to be a test. And it's like, who cares? Why are you telling? Bobby was like, why are they telling everybody this? Like, it was weird. And in the middle of my appointment, of course, I heard buzzing in the next room, and everybody's like, oh my God, is that the test? Yeah, it was freaking weird. And if you haven't seen the movie Cell, or I was doing a video about Cell, I might do another one later tonight and talk to you about that because it's freaking scary. That movie and the concept of it, if that shit ever happens, Faith, and I drop off the face of the earth, right? If I drop off the face of the earth, it's because I'm burning this thing right here. It's scary. So let me get back on track. Poor Faith. The stuff you have to deal with me, sis. Thank you for bringing that up because it was discussed yesterday in the Rooster household for sure. So I'm still on open screen. I covered everything in the book that I wanted to cover. Okay, so the last part, the parts about the movie, jumps right into the race. Artemis is who? Now we know who Artemis was and how Parzival knew her in the book more so than the movie. The librarian versus Og. Now these two bullets go hand in hand. The difference between Ogden Morrow character in the book and the Og that you would see in the movie. Now, I mentioned that in the movie, you only see this guy like maybe 2 or 3 times. He's not a big character. In the book, he's almost as big of a character as James Halliday. It extensively touches on how Ogden Morrow was James Halliday's best friend. They were practically brothers. And then when meeting Kira Underwood was a London student who was traveling abroad, met them when they were 16 years old. As a matter of fact, in book 2, Ready Player 2, it talks about how they were at the arcade just playing video games, and Ogden happened to notice a beautiful blue-eyed blonde-haired girl playing a video game and beat the whole thing on 1 quarter. And he goes over and tells her how impressed he is and how that's how they met, right? Then, of course, James Halliday jumps in and says, dude, I need a ride home, and just kind of C-blocks him. But that's in the other book. In the book, Ready Player One, Ogden Morrow is described as just as big as James Halliday. In fact, when he met and married his wife, Kira, they were the ones that kind of promoted James Halliday's Oasis idea into GSS, the company that they were. Kira was very artistic, so she did a lot of the designing of the planets in Oasis, the emblems that they had for their avatars, all kinds of things, ideas as to what things should look like. Ogden Morrow was a very business-oriented kind of guy. He was the PR one. He was more outgoing. In fact, it describes in the book a part where a news outlet wanted to interview Ogden Morrow after Parzival found the first key. And he agreed. But remember, IOI, now you saw them in the movie. In the book, they also owned the news outlet. Faith is going to love this. IOI owns everything in the real world of this book, right? and they own the news outlet, they own the media, they own the telecasters. So this young telecaster sitting there interviewing Ogden Morrow and talking about what do you think and all this stuff. And Ogden Morrow's like, I hope he wins. He's like, he's so bold. He starts dogging IOI and saying, I hope a regular gunter that's 12 years old and has nothing to do with IOI wins the egg just to rub IOI's face in it. And he's talking all this trash. And the newscaster's like, Mr. Morrow, I mean, IOI's, not harmful. Or he says something like, of course you think that, pretty boy, because they own you. And he's laughing. And then the newscaster gets all flustered and tries to move it along. We've seen that happen in real life on the media. I mean, just people calling out the fake news. So Ogden Morrow is very boisterous, and he doesn't look anything like the character in the movie. I mean, he is described, for me, he sounds like Hagrid from Harry Potter, that big guy with the long hair and the beard. He's a huge guy, and he's very boisterous and loud, and he's got this mighty handshake. And so in the book, I mean, because he was more upfront and bold, that's how he ended up asking Kira out. Even though in the book it described that both James Halliday and Ogden Morrow had a crush on Kira in the same sense, it's just that Ogden asked her out, James Halliday didn't, which kind of helps make sense of the part in the movie when they end up going into The Shining and talking about how James Halliday was afraid to ask her. That's kind of where it relates between the book and the movie. Now, if you've already seen the movie, if you haven't, I'm sorry. But in the movie, there's this librarian that turns out to be the avatar for Og. In the book, that's not the case at all. In the book, Og has his own avatar, and everybody knows him. In fact, he holds and hosts weekly nightclub parties, and he even has one for his birthday, which is the part in the movie where you see they're in the big dome where everybody's hover dancing up above. In the book, that was Ogden Morrow's birthday. And so he invited Parzival and Artemis to attend because they're 2 out of the 5 people that ended up getting the first key. Now, we're going to have to talk about the other characters that get the key as well. H, Daito, and Shoto. And that's very different than in the movie. So I'm not going to do that now because obviously I've got to stick to this outline. But I'm going to show you something between the movie and the book. So Ogden Morrow here in this clip. Now, just to caveat, on my last videos, I was able to play the sound, but I got a copyright strike because I guess you can't even play the sound for these movie clips. So I put on the subtitles for you guys. But this is supposed to be James Halliday in the movie, which I would admit the description in the book is pretty much the same. Ogden Morrow, kind of, but when he gets older, not at all. Because at the end of the movie, when he opens up the van, that's not what I would picture him to look like at all. So here, I've got to mute it because I'm going to get the strike. So here he's talking to Artemis. They're in the museum watching a memory. First of all, remember the description of Artemis in the book? That's nothing like her, right? Not only is that nothing like her, but if she turns her face, she's got like that thing on the side of her face. Actually, it's not there. I'm surprised. But in the book, she doesn't have that birthmark either. So they're talking about this memory and how James Halliday liked Kira as well as Ogden, but she doesn't actually go out with James Halliday because he never asked her out. And he's talking about this. Now, here's this librarian, right, who ends up giving him the coin, and we'll talk about the difference in that. So that's supposedly Ogden Morrow's avatar, which is weird because in the book, the way I saw it described, he's got long hair, the beard. This guy's very clean cut, very prestigious, right? The biggest clue of the contest, I think this is kind of where he talks about This is where he talks about going back in time, and I think maybe figuring out if he goes backwards, or is this after that? I think it's after, because he was by himself. Oh wow, a quarter. And then she ends up giving them back the quarter. So I'm not going to dwell on this too long because it's just looking at the pictures. But first of all, Artemis in this one, she's tall, she's slender, there's no curves. It's not, not anything like what is described in the book. And then, of course, if this is Ogden Morrow, they don't say anything until the end of the movie. He's not going to high five him. I thought that was funny. Now, here, I do have to admit, there is the avatar for James Halliday, a Narak, right? In the book, this does really kind of looks like a Narak. He's got the long, dark, flowing robes, the beard. He's got the wizard look. I have to say that does look pretty similar to what the book describes. But in the book, I'll tell you this much. There is nothing about this race like this in it. So it's still cute, but not the same. And I'm not picking it apart. I'm just saying that's not the same. So here we go. Let me stop sharing. And I'm back. Okay, so I'm at about 36 minutes. That's just about right. And Faith, what have you been saying? Did you know Cruz was talking about stem cells in Congress when the alert went off? Yeah, meaning humans. They all acted like they didn't know what was going to happen and how do we shut it off? Yeah, just shut off nobody has a concept. Just shut off the cell phone. Just shut off the cell phone. Leave it at home. Leave it in your car. Just mocking the morons who don't know. Now I'm off topic. Conspiracy faith. Yes, that's right. That's okay. I like the conspiracy stuff because eventually it ends up becoming history. Conspiracy to history, right? So I'm going to stop at that point in Ready Player One. And next time I make a video, I'll pick up on that. I think I'm going to do another video here in a minute for Cell and kind of do that because I did finish reading the book. Very unnerving. I'm not going to lie. It was very unnerving to read that book. And in true Stephen King fashion, he leaves the ending open for you to kind of wonder like, wait, what? What happened? So I'll tell you about it. So anyways, I'm going to sign off. Faith, thanks for hanging out with me, sis. I'm gotta go. Love you so much too. Until next time. And I think Faith has got the right idea. I changed my name to Edward. Nope, it's on this side. I changed my name to Edward because the channel's called Edward Rooster. Those of you that know me know my real name's Shannon. But you know what? I figured it'd just be better to just stay consistent. But I also, if you notice that the little ticker tape at the bottom, I use, and you guys could probably see it when I was sharing the screen, I use a website called Free Novel Reads. It doesn't have every book in the world, but if you're looking for some books that are free online, you just click and it opens up. Free Novel Reads works great. It does have some other novels I've never heard of, but I mean, for the most part, it's where I found Cell, The Shining, Ready Player One, and there's a whole host of other books. I mean, it's not like they only have a dozen books. They have a plethora. So, I mean, I encourage you guys to read it before you watch the movies, and some of them don't even have movies. So, I mean, it's fun to kind of just read and get the true perspective of the novelist. I also wanted to point out that I had an idea that if anybody's doing a book report, I'll tell you a quick story. When I was a kid and I was in high school and we were told to do the book reports, we always did a book report on the movie The Outsiders because there was a book, but they also made the movie. And back in those days, they didn't make movies out of the books very often. So, I mean, I wish I had thought about doing The Shining, but that would have been a big mistake because, I mean, if my teacher knew what The Shining really said, and then I did a book report and cited the movie, I would have been screwed. So, any of you out there doing a book report, or any of you out there that read a book and saw a movie and wanted me to look into the differences, hey, I'm happy to do that too. So just like Faith said, gotta go. I'm going to go bathroom, set up another video for the cell and continue on that. And I'll be back in a little bit, guys. So thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you in a little bit.